Hi, welcome to my channel. So I am starting to make YouTube videos again. It's been about 5 years since I have posted one, you know, COVID, there's really not much else I have to do. So I figured, why not? I'm gonna start making YouTube videos again. So as my first video back, I was really interested in the palette tag that has been created. Two YouTubers came up with this, they collaborated on it. I'm sure you probably have seen already a bunch of videos. I'm not super on top of it. I'm a little behind, but that's okay because this is what I want to do and this channel is for me. So it was started by Allie Glines and Samantha March. I can link their videos below if you want to see theirs. They started this. So I have a list of all the things that I'm going to talk about. It's like, you know, smallest palette, most expensive palette, most colorful, all that good stuff. So we'll get into that. So let's just get started without further ado. Okay, so the first thing on the list is what is your newest eyeshadow palette, and mine is the Charlotte Tilbury Pillow Talk palette. I'm really excited to try this. I've never tried anything from Charlotte Tilbury, so this is my first purchase. I did recently get this in the mail, so I actually haven't tried it yet. Here is the inside. It's really pretty, very simple, very everyday type of palette for sure. Very nude, very neutral, but I really like this. If the eyeshadow formula is good, which I've heard good things, I honestly don't think I've ever heard anything bad about Charlotte Tilbury in general. So I'm very excited. If this is a good formula, I think that this is gonna live here in my vanity all the time and I'm gonna use it quite a bit. So I'm very excited to try it, but I don't really have a lot to say about it since I haven't put it on my eyes yet. All right, so the next thing is, what is your oldest eyeshadow palette? Now this one's hard for me. I actually just had the hardest time thinking back to like my first eyeshadow palette purchase. So I went back into like my purchase history and like on Ulta and Sephora to try to just like remind myself what palettes I've had the longest. And I believe that it's these three. I actually bought them all at the same time. So it is the Lorac Pro 1, the Lorac Pro 2, and the Naked 3 palette. So I actually think I bought the Naked 3 before I bought the original Naked palette, because when I first started getting into makeup, like this had just come out. So I just wanted to buy it because everyone was talking about this one specifically at the time. And I don't know, maybe the tones spoke to me, I guess. To be honest, this isn't one of my favorite palettes. It never really was one of my favorite palettes. The Naked palettes in general, I just haven't had the best experience with personally. I actually really like Urban Decay eyeshadows. Their formula is pretty good. The Electric palette from Urban Decay is one of the best palettes ever. I love that palette. I still have mine even though it's so old, and honestly I don't really reach for it anymore because it's so old, and I do have a lot of other colorful palettes now, but it was like one of the first that I can remember of just like a super all colorful, super intense eyeshadow palette. So I love that one, and I do have other ones in my collection. The, what is it called, the On the Run or Born to Run, let me see, I have it right here actually. Yeah, the Born to Run palette, that one is actually one of my favorite palettes. It lives in my vanity. It's a staple for me. If you had to pick like one palette to have, I highly recommend that palette. So I don't have anything against Urban Decay, but their Naked line is just, for some reason, not my vibe. I think part of it is because I really appreciate matte shadows, and these tend to have more shimmery kind of shades than mattes, and I prefer kind of the other way around if it's gonna be not a 50-50 split. Oh shoot, I can't close this. There we go. Okay, and then about the Lorac ones, these I actually adored. Specifically this one, this is the 2, I think. Is this the 2? Does it say on here? Yes, this is the 2. This one I used so much, so much. Specifically, like these 4 shades here in the front, these ones. I just loved these so much. I would wear this basically every single day to work, well, and just in life, but even like on weekends and stuff, when I could play a little bit more with different shades and things and take a little bit longer. With going to work and wearing makeup every day, I just wanted the quickest thing to get me out of the door, and this like little area right here just was so easy for me to use. Very neutral, very everyday kind of looks. But the rest of the palette is also super beautiful. I remember swatching this for the first time in Ulta, the navy shade specifically. I just remember being like, oh my gosh, it's so beautiful and so pigmented. And that's one thing I will say I really like about these better than the Naked palettes. I just prefer this formula. It is a little bit powdery, but I tend to like powdery eyeshadows. I feel that powdery eyeshadows tend to perform really well, and I have no problems with pigmentation or blending when they are a little bit more of a powdery kick up kind of formula, and kick up just doesn't bother me. I just really don't care. I have a whole vanity that I get messy every day, and while I haven't always had that, it's just not something that's bothered me because I otherwise would do my makeup in the bathroom and I'm like by a sink, so it's just not that big of a deal for me to have kick up. But if you don't like kick up, you are not gonna like these palettes for sure. The black one is also good, the Pro one. It's actually more neutral. I'm surprised. I think now I would reach for this more. This is probably more my color jam, but back in the day, this was holy grail status. Okay, so the next one on the list is your most expensive palette, and pretty much everyone's expecting to say the same thing, which is either it's going to be Natasha Denona or Pat McGrath, let's be real. So mine is definitely this Natasha Denona Star palette. I actually just looked up the prices to make sure that this one was as expensive as my other ones. I was about to just talk about all of my Natasha Denona palettes because I thought they were the same price, but this one is actually more expensive. This one is $169. Which is very expensive for an eyeshadow palette. This is what it looks like inside. It is very pretty. I will say I don't reach for this as much as $169 should have me reaching for this. I prefer a couple of her other palettes a little bit more. Just the color selection, I guess. I know her formulas changed constantly. And to be honest, I haven't used this in so long that I don't even remember how I felt about it. Well, I will say I must have really liked it because I bought other palettes from her since, and I truly am such a huge Natasha Denona fan. So there's actually, I think, another palette I'm going to talk about from her later on in the list. But yeah, so I mean, it's good. I remember some of the shimmers are a little flaky, but that kind of happens in Natasha Denona stuff. But it tends to be really impactful on the eyes. It might be a little bit more of a stubborn formula sometimes to work with, but it's because it just gleams on your face. So yeah, this is my most expensive eyeshadow palette. Okay, so the next thing on the list is what is your most affordable palette? And I'm pretty sure it's these ones. These are 2 ColourPop palettes. Both of these are actually collaborations with Kathleen Lights, who is a YouTuber, if you don't know. So I bought these both. I actually don't think I have any other ColourPop palettes like this size. I have a couple of their like bigger ones. One of the ones from Kathleen Light, the So Jaded one, and then the Bare Necessities. But other than that, these are my only like littler ColourPop ones. But of course, these are my most affordable. ColourPop is just very affordable. Let me open these up so you can actually see the insides. This is the Zodiac palette. That color right here is so pretty. This is a really nice palette. And then this is the Dream Street palette. Also very pretty. I will say that I do prefer just the color selection in the Zodiac one. I think this one came out first though, and I really, really like Kathleen Lights, so I was gonna buy it pretty much no matter what. So I bought it anyways. I mean, I don't dislike it by any means. I just prefer the Zodiac one just a little bit more. Like that blue shade is really pretty. The Taurus shade is also extremely pretty. I know it's just kind of like a basic brown to some people, but it's like got this like peanut butteriness to it, which I really like. So yeah, this is just a really a good palette from ColourPop. So those are my most affordable ones. All right, so the next palette on the list is your everyday palette, and mine is absolutely this one. It is my Too Faced Chocolate Bar palette. I love this palette. I think even though it came out a few years back, I don't remember the exact year, but it's been out for a minute. I mean, quite a while, years. And yes, this is the same one that I bought years ago, but you know what? It still performs just as I got it yesterday. Like it still performs the same. The formula has really stood the test of time. I think sometimes I look back at things that I thought were really good a few years ago, and now makeup has just come a long way in the last few years, and some formulas just haven't stood the test of time because there's been so much new stuff that has come out. But this really is still very good. I still really like the Too Faced formula. It's a very good palette. Now I will say that I know other palettes from Too Faced don't necessarily have the same formula. They don't perform the same. So I don't necessarily like buy everything that Too Faced comes out with because of that. I kind of wait for some reviews to come out first and vet it a little bit more. But this palette is so good. I'm a little concerned they've discontinued it. I was looking the other day because I was thinking about doing this video, and I thought, you know, it is my everyday palette and I have had it for so long, it probably would be a good idea for me to get a new one, or, you know, at least just see if it's available, because at some point I'm gonna want to replace this. I'm sure this is expired, even though it performs fine still. I have had it for such a long time, but it's sold out everywhere. And I don't know, they came out with that other neutral nudes, I forget what it's called, but something that was a very neutral brown kind of palette. And I'm wondering if that's gonna replace this, which to me would be such a shame because this is such a good palette. And I remember when this came out and everyone was talking about this palette. It was like, this was the palette to have, just like at one point the Urban Decay Naked palettes were like that. So I think it'd be a shame if they got this discontinued, but I'm a little concerned that that's what's happening, so hopefully not. All right, the next one is Most Colorful palette, and I love colorful palettes. Like I love rainbow palettes, everything. So I do have a good amount of colorful eyeshadow palettes that have a lot of color in them, but by far my most colorful is this palette from Viseart. It just literally has an entire rainbow in it, every color you could really need. I've had this for quite some time. This is such a staple for me because it's nice and compact, and so I can keep it in my vanity all the time, even though I don't necessarily use it every single day. If you want to just add a little pop of color, you can with this, or you can go on full, all colorful if you want to. The only thing I will say, if you want to do like a full one color kind of look, sometimes you can't really do that with this. Like if I wanted to do an all pink eyeshadow look, I have one pink shade. There aren't any other colors to like blend it out, deepen it up that are also pink. But it's such a good staple of just the rainbow colors that you need. So highly recommend this. Honestly, I love the Viseart formula. So this is a staple for me personally. Okay, so speaking of Viseart, the next thing on the list is your tiniest palette. And that is two of my Viseart palettes here. I have the Petite Pro. I'll show you how small that is. That is so teeny tiny. So not only the size of the palette is small, but also the little eyeshadows inside are very small. So they were able to still fit in 8 shades in here, which I kind of find pretty impressive. So if you are a minimalist, or you just do not have a lot of space, you do not have the space to store a bunch of palettes, I really do recommend these. They are a wonderful formula. Just like I said, Viseart has great formula eyeshadows. But they're just not going to take up a lot of space, but you still get a good amount of color selection. They curate their color stories pretty well, so I do recommend these. So this is the first one. The next one I've actually never used. because I just got it. This is the Petite Pro 5 Soleil. And this is what it looks like. This one's so cute and so colorful compared to the other one. So you do get a big variety in these. They don't have a ton yet, but I think this is the latest one. This is the 5. So they also have ones that are just a slight bit bigger. I think they're like 2 of these together. So if you want a little bit more color selection, but you still want it to be small, those are still quite small, even with 2 of them together, because you can just see just how like tiny that really is. I'm so excited to use this. I'm really excited about this shade right here. It's got such like a pretty shimmery duochrome action happening, so cannot wait. Also, yellow is my favorite color, and so the packaging, I just couldn't resist that. Next on the list is your biggest palette, and mine is the Be Perfect Stacey Marie XL Pro palette. Oof. It's a mouthful. This is what it looks like. It is extremely colorful. So like I was just saying, I am a colorful lover. I really love my colorful eyeshadows. So this was kind of speaking to me. I did just get this semi recently, so I haven't played with it a ton. I do have a review of this palette up on my Instagram if you do want to check that out. My Instagram is I Want More Makeup. I will put that in the description bar as well. And that is my Instagram specifically just for makeup products. So I just talk about makeup stuff. If you want to follow me on my personal one, it's I Want More Laura. But this is a nice colorful palette. The formula is a lot different than I had anticipated, and a little different than I'm used to. It's a very, very dry formula, but the colors are so vibrant. Like this Ecstasy color and this Pep Talk color were frankly enough for me to want to buy this palette. Also, I was kind of surprised by how much I loved this shade Y though. It's like a nice minty pale pastel green, and I really, really love that color. The one thing I don't love about this palette is these highlighters that are in it up here. I just wish that they weren't in it, frankly. I think this palette could have saved some space and not included those, and I don't really love them. I don't think the formula is my favorite for a highlight, and also the colors just don't really work. There's one that's like super white, and then the other ones are too dark for me. So I can use the really white one because I'm super pale, but it's still just not a formula that I really like. But the eyeshadows, if you just had that, I would like that. Okay, so the next thing on the list is a palette that was worth the hype, and I did already talk about this. It is the Chocolate Bar palette for me. I did struggle a little bit with what palette to choose for this, because a lot of times palettes I feel like are worth the hype because there's a reason why they're hyped from the beginning. It's because they're good, and so you try them and they're good. Now there are some times where you see like a photo of a palette and you think, oh my gosh, those colors are gonna be everything, or swatches, oh my gosh, they just look like they swatch beautifully, and it just doesn't perform that well in reality. So sometimes that does happen, where you see the promotion before people actually try it. But usually if people are hyping up a product saying it's good, it's for a reason. And this I chose because it lives up to the quality that I would expect from something that is so hyped, but it's also lived up to it for me for years, and it's something that I reach for so often. So for me, this was absolutely worth the hype, and it's one of those things that I'm so happy that I own. So this is definitely my worth the hype palette. Okay, so the next palette on the list is one that is not worth the hype. So for me, that palette is my Smoke Sessions palette. I'm not necessarily saying this is a bad palette. I just think that this was so coveted. This was like so hard to get, sold out, and it took them a long time to bring it back, and then it sold out again, I'm pretty sure, pretty fast. I don't know if it's available now or not. I do think did they make it permanent? I'm actually not sure. I think that they made this a permanent palette. I know they just came out with their new like 420 palette for this year. Look, I don't hate the palette by any means. I just think that the formula is a little bit more difficult to work with. The shimmery shades are pretty flaky, and so you have to be a little bit more patient working with them. And most of the palette is shimmer. There is 3 shimmers on this side, 3 shimmers on this side, and then 2 mattes in the middle. And there's really no transition shade that I can use. These are very dark matte colors, which is fine. I have plenty of transition shades in my collection. So I kind of see this as like an add-on palette that I use. I don't really do looks that are strictly with only these colors. I think I have before, but it's not something that I necessarily do every time I reach for this. And I also, because it's a little bit more finicky to work with, don't find myself reaching for it all that much. So I don't know, I just remember everyone wanted this palette at one point. It just seemed like it was so cool. And Melt's a cool brand. They like exude a coolness, but this just didn't hit the mark for me. I like some of their other palettes a little bit better. I prefer their matte formula, and this only has 2 mattes. So, but I will say, like, the colors are pretty, but like even I just barely touched that, and I got so much, like, I don't know if you can see that, probably not, but it's very flaky. Like, can you see how just like chunky that is on my hand? Oh, I think a piece literally just fell off my hand. So it is just a chunky formula. But the colors are pretty. So I still use it, and I still will use it. It's not a horrible palette by any means. It's just not worth the hype for me personally. Okay, so there's 2 more that I need to talk about, and one is my most used, and one is favorite palette from a favorite brand. I'm gonna go ahead and just talk about my most used really quick and get it out of the way, because we've seen it so many times. This is my most used palette by far. It lives in my vanity. I use it constantly. It is something that I can easily do a 3-minute look with. That's all I really need to say. I've talked about this at nauseum now. So I'm gonna move on now to a favorite palette from a favorite brand. This is the last palette I'm gonna talk about, and that is my Natasha Denona Sunset palette. This palette is so good. It is what I have on my eyes today. This is what she looks like. And she's just so pretty. Oh, these colors are so nice. And this palette came out like before, well, it was like right around the same time that everyone was wanting warm shades and like reds and stuff. But it was a little bit before everyone was doing it. And so you see this yellow, the red, and I just melted and needed it. I just love doing a good sunset eye look. So this really spoke to me. Plus I love this formula. This formula is so good. I love Natasha Denona mattes. Like, her mattes are so good. I love them. I will say I did reach for this today to do my look because I had to use a palette I was going to talk about. And I feel like I might need a new one. It's a little bit just, I don't know if it's like gone bad, but I feel like this red shade used to be a little bit different. Like, I feel like it's almost a little bit brown when I pick it up on my brush. Although I will say, I think that it does look red on my eyes, so maybe I'm just being overly sensitive. But I got this years ago now at this point, which is crazy how much I keep saying that for all these palettes, how I've gotten them years ago. It just shows how long you keep your makeup collection for. But I still obviously purchase all the time because I have a bunch of new palettes in my collection too. So I think I might get another one at some point. Maybe I'll wait for a sale or something, since I do already own it and it's so freaking expensive. But I will say it is 100% worth it. If you've been eyeing Natasha Denona eyeshadows, this one is amazing. 100% amazing, 100% would recommend. Her other palettes do have different formulas, so just keep that in mind if you think that, I'm raving about this one, but you're gonna go get a different one and expect the same thing. It's not necessarily gonna be the case. However, I will say I own 4 Natasha Denona palettes, I believe, and I love them all. Even the Tropic palette, which I know a lot of people don't like, but but I really do like that one. You just have to use the shimmery shades with your finger or it's just gonna give you a bad time, frankly. But I love it. The shades in there are beautiful. Anyway, but that's not what we're here to talk about, not the Tropic palette. We're here to talk about the Sunset palette. This is very good. I love Natasha Denona. Her brand, I just love. I like her. I like watching her Instagram. I like watching her do people's makeup. I like her vibe, her artisticness. I just really like that brand. So this is definitely my favorite palette from a brand that I love. Okay, so that is everything. That was my palette tag video. So hopefully you guys enjoyed it. I do want to start creating more YouTube videos and more content. So please go ahead and subscribe if you want to, if you're curious at all about the videos that I'm gonna come out with in the future. So thank you for watching and I'll see you guys next time.